FS Securities, an education and information firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And every Monday morning I go through what happened globally around the world and try to forecast what we may see these coming weeks. I'll show you how investors and traders can make money on global markets. I'll show you what is hot and what is not, and what you should hold and what you should fold. And by the way, if you have any particular feedback, we would really love to hear from you. Well, this is actually at the close on Saturday morning. We can see that the Dow closed 9 points lower. That is less than 0.1%. Let's call that steady from the day before. And you can see the day before, when we had a good day on Friday morning, we had 369 points rise on the Dow, 1.5%. However, on Thursday morning, the market was down 1.6%. So over the last 3 days, we can see that the market is almost steady, slightly higher perhaps. The S&P 500 index, that is the broader index, was up 0.2% on Saturday, and the day before was up 1.7%. So it finished the last 3 days on a positive point. And the same thing with the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq was up 0.4% on Saturday morning. In Europe, the Stoxx 50 index, which comprises most major European markets, was almost steady. In London, the FTSE 100 index was down 0.2%. The DAX in Germany was actually up 0.1%. And in Japan, the Nikkei index was down 0.8%. And its Shanghai index in China was down 2.3%. Gold on Saturday was closed at $1,735 per ounce. Now that's slightly below the previous 2 days. As you can see here, it's a slight drop. That $13 increase, by the way, compares the finish on Saturday morning versus the trade or the price on Friday night. So they can't compare those two. This number is actually in the morning, and then of course that is a change in the morning from the previous night. Brent oil, $35.12, slightly below the previous 2 days, and the same thing with the West Texas crude oil, the American oil, $33.25, again slightly below the previous 2 days. Soybeans, for those people who follow what's happening between China and the US, remember China buys a lot of soybeans from America. Well, the soybeans 833 versus 845.46 previous days, and that's of course the price per bushel. The Australian dollar versus the US 65.4, almost steady, and against the euro give you 59.9, let's call that 60 euro cents, and 53.7 British pence, and 107 New Zealand. And if you follow Bitcoin this morning was trading at 9,885 US, down slightly from the day before, and that converts to approximately 13,810 Australian dollars, and that is down nearly $300 overnight. Now look at what happened, the change over 1 week versus the change over 2 weeks. And here we see that the Dow was down 2.7% last week. However, when you put the 2 weeks together, it was only slightly lower by 0.2%. Down for the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq last week. However, over the last 2 weeks combined, we have a positive increase. The US dollar continues to be stronger, 1.3% stronger or higher over the last 2 weeks. The Australian dollar slightly weak over the last 2 weeks, as you can see. Despite the 1.8% drop last week, it was only down 0.08% over the last 2 weeks. Now in terms of commodities, gold Over the last 2 weeks, $44.60 US per ounce. Silver had a good 2 weeks, 8% rise last week. Add another 5% on top of it the week before, we end up with 13.3% rise in the price of silver over the last 2 weeks. Very strong momentum with silver, and we're going to have a look at silver again today. West Texas crude oil, 51% rise over the last 2 weeks. Half of it, or less than half, came from the previous week, and from last week, and then the rest is from the week before. Okay, now if you look at the mechanical system, which we've designed over 25 years, we see here the weekly, and the weekly changes, still combines for the investor the monthly and the weekly, and for the trader the weekly and the daily. Then we need to have confirmation from the smaller to the smaller period chart with the higher period chart. So for instance, if for argument's sake the Dow in the monthly chart, you end up with a bullish indicators 5 out of 8, and then you go to the weekly, and then you find that you've got only 3 instead of 5 minimum, then you go neutral. But if you have 5 and 5 as a minimum across both time frames charts, then obviously you go that particular direction. Remember, the long-term chart changes, for instance, in the monthly once a month. At the end of the month, we have the indicators, and they don't change for the whole month. Then we go to the weekly, and then the weekly can change every week. So we have changes, so just to let you know. All right, now the daily, again, here we look at the daily. These are also done daily, however, they still look at the monthly and the weekly for the investor. And we try to actually see how we change on a weekly basis, taking consideration of all the charts from daily to weekly and monthly, and we end up with this. And then every day we do further analysis and see if there are any changes. So if, for argument's sake, we're looking for a change somehow, if we have, I'm trying to find something here, we have neutral, neutral, neutral for cocoa, for argument's sake. Then we go here and we find that cocoa on Wednesday morning has gone to bullish, so there is a change. The weekly does not change at the end of the week, it stays at the end of the week the same. The daily changes every day based on all the time charts. Looking at the ASX 200, like the American market, we've actually went down all the way, and then we tried to retrace to recover. However, we haven't gone past the 50%. Last week, you can see here the weekly candle tried to cross the 38.2 Fibonacci retracement and then ended up below it or at the line. And today, because we expect the futures to go higher, or at least the futures are telling us that the market most likely will open higher by 60 points. So the week will start by seeing a new candle, and the new candle will be above the 38.2. How it finishes today and how it finishes the week, obviously we'll have to see it. On the daily chart, the parabolic stop and reverse, shown by the red dots here, bullish. The stochastic was bullish, and it crossed below the red line here, but it hasn't crossed that horizontal line which represent by 80%. And today I'm pretty sure that blue line will go higher again with the bullish. So we have a bullish stochastic, bullish parabolic stop and reverse, and the 9-day moving average happens to be above the 21-day moving average. That's bullish. we have all these candles, even though the last candle is red, is still above the 21 in the upper range of the Bollinger Band. They are positive for the short term. However, if you look at the 50-day moving average is below the 100 and the 100 is below the 200, which you can't see here, then obviously the long term is bearish. And by the way, if you want to learn about all these indicators and how to pick signals, we run classes, we tailor-make them for you, and all you have to do is talk to us and we'll teach you how to read signals and be more successful on the stock market, looking at charts and looking at technical analysis and look at fundamental analysis as well. And of course we build certain techniques about how to manage the portfolio. Now for the Australian market, as you can see here, our market is the gauge is the ASX 200 is made up but to a certain extent by two major sectors, the financial and the materials. The financial sector were actually bearish over the last 2 weeks. Last week was 0.65, and you combine the 2 days together, the weekly, put the 2 weeks together and you end up with 1.8%. Again, that is showing you negative last week and higher negative the week before, and that really represented by the 1.8% combined change over 2 weeks. However, the materials was up 9% over the last 2 weeks, 6% last week, and of course that's an extra 3% the week before, giving you 9% over 2 weeks. Well, that has reflected on the Australian market, and you can see here the Australian market over the ASX 200 was up 1.7% last week and about 0.2% the week before, giving you 1.96% rise over the last 2 weeks. In terms of looking at the stocks, you can see here ANZ bearish for 2 weeks, Commonwealth Bank bearish for 2 weeks, NAB bearish for 2 weeks, and Westpac bearish for 2 weeks. We've been hammered badly by all the financial institutions. The hedge funds from overseas are actually hedging on our market by shortening our indices. Now there is a campaign now to stop short trading on the Australian market while the economic situation is not very good. Alright, well now we see that BHP was bullish over 2 weeks, 8.4% rise last week and another 1 point or thereabout rise the week before, giving you 9.3% rise. And you look at Rio, here Rio also had good 2 weeks, 7 and 10. Now on energy we look at Santos bullish. However, you can see here it was up 10% last week, but obviously because we have a lower number over 2 weeks, it indicates that last week was up 10%. However, the week before was down 6%, and therefore you end up with 4% or 4.7% rise over 2 weeks. Now Santos had the same thing. Woodside Petroleum again rise last week and then it dropped the week before. Wesfarmers had a good 2 weeks, 2.5 and 3.7. Newcrest Mines had 14% rise over 2 weeks, 10% 2 weeks ago and 4% last week. Alright, now look at our mechanical system for the sectors. What do we have here? We have the financial sectors bearish, obviously, gold bullish, and then that's for all investors and traders. However, for the more aggressive traders, we've got bullish on most other sectors with the exception of consumer staples. So if you are trading consumer staples, you'd be aware that we are bearish at the moment. Looking at the stocks, I don't know how well you can see that, but anyway, on the daily, you can see here NAB bearish, CBA bearish, ANZ bearish, and Westpac bearish. Bullish, you have Newcrest Mines. So you want to trade gold at the moment. And then for the aggressive and very aggressive traders, we have a lot of trades here, taking BHP, taking as well as Newcrest Mines, Santos, Transurban, TPG, and Worley, and finally Woodside Petroleum. We like to look at volume because it's very important to realize that volume is an important indicator. So you can see here for the last 6 days, 5 out of 6, we had more advances than declines. Even last week we had 1 negative. However, the volume was still high, slightly higher than the day before. But you can see that, the market was actually going up. And for the last week, we had a reasonably good, positive week. Week on week, we can see that last week, for the first time over 2 weeks, we've seen the advances exceeding declines. CSL had a good week last week. Actually, it was down 2.3%. And you can see here that most companies were actually down. That's only on a daily basis. We look at volume, and we look at volume on a weekly basis and compare last week volume against the 50-week average, moving average volume. So we look at the volume every week for 50 weeks. We work out the moving average, and then we compare the last volume last week with that particular benchmark. And if it's higher, then obviously we have it here and we start to study it. Well, as far as the top 50 is concerned, on the weekly we couldn't see anything on the bullish or bearish side for the top 50. However, for the mid cap, for more aggressive traders, we have these companies here. Ocean Gold had an increase of 13% in its price, and the average volume is usually 2.1 million. Well, last week we've seen 5.2 million transaction over the week. So now we've got higher price, higher volume, then we need to actually go and look into it and see if we can trade it on our CFD platform. LSE Gold was up 6% with 114% rise. Instead of 2.1, it ended up with 4.5 million transactions. On the downside, we've got those 3 companies. On the daily, again, this here, we look at the daily average volume and compare the last volume on the last day with the 50-day moving average for the volume. So, for instance, this company here, Bellevue Gold, had a rise in its price by 306%, and the volume was 407%. So instead of the daily volume of 755, we ended up on Friday with 3.8 million transactions. That is nearly more than 4 times its average volume. Higher price, higher volume, we need to go and to look into it. And of course, because these are aggressive trades, we must see if we can actually trade these stocks in CFDs or in options. Unfortunately, I looked at it already, Bellevue Gold and Eclipse, both of these companies cannot be traded on the CMC platform trading CFDs. Again, if you want a copy of this slide, all you have to do is go to the website and you will find on the website. And by the way, as a matter of interest, this will actually be recorded and also on YouTube. Alright, well anyway, finally before I close, I want to tell you that this disclaimer is telling us that we only give you general advice, no personal advice, because we don't know your risk appetite, we don't know your financial circumstances. So we plead with you that before you take any action, please consult with us or talk to your professional advisor. And be sure that nothing is guaranteed in life except death and taxes. So there is no guarantee that you're going to make a fortune trading some of these stocks that we shown here. So if you have any questions, all you have to do is ask. How are you going to ask me? Well, you can write to me at George@FS Securities. FS stands for full service. That's FS Securities, plural.com.au. You can call me on my mobile. If you're ringing from overseas, 61 for the country code. You don't need the zero. Become 61 411 259526. So if you're ringing locally, obviously on my mobile 0411 259526. As I mentioned, I'm available 7 days a week, almost 10 hours a week, 10 hours a day. And of course, there are times when I go and play tennis and play bridge and so on. But anyway, you can try your luck 7 days a week on my mobile phone. Finally, have a good day and happy trading.